Hello and welcome to another episode of The Influential Nonprofit. As usual, I'm your host. I'm Mary Ann Dersch. I work with nonprofit leaders to master the art of influence so they can ask for and receive anything they want without feeling rejected, ineffective, or pushy, because who wants to feel that? My work has over the years moved more and more in from external communications to internal communications, really how we lead ourselves, how our day-to-day decision-making impacts our everyday, or how our thoughts and feelings impact our day-to-day decision-making. And I love it when I meet somebody and we're like kindred spirits. And that's why I have today. This is Mary Hiland. She is a leadership expert too. And we're going to talk all about leadership in nonprofits. And I want to focus especially today on one of the biggest pain points that I see is your board and building board relationships. Before I get into that, Mary, first of all, welcome to the Influential Nonprofit.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
And I always start with the same question. So tell me something that you're proud of that you don't get to brag about a lot.
Oh, I guess I'm just really proud that I have been so resilient in the nonprofit sector, from starting as a single mom, got through 5 college degrees and ended up consulting and coaching. I'm just really proud that I can hopefully be a role model, not because I'm so wonderful, but because I'm just like anybody else. And I want people out there to know that they can have successful careers in nonprofits. They don't have to sacrifice themselves. They don't have to give up a reasonable amount of compensation. You can have it and you can do it.
That is so true. Yay, I love that. And because you said, okay, so in your bio, you were, after 26 years an executive and board member, you've been consulting and coaching nonprofits for 20 years. So you've had a nice long career, and then, and that you can sustain that business for that long. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, and you are Mary is a speaker, researcher, and author of the #1 international bestseller, Love Your Board.
You can love your board.
Wouldn't we? I mean, here's the thing. This is what I want to say is, the board structure is awkward. I'm an unwieldy, and I'm just going to say a little bit patriarchal. And so what happens is, this is what I see. So I'd love to jump off in this with your thoughts about this. Here's what I see is that we bring these people on for their expertise. Hey, you're the lead, you're the board members, you lead the executive, but then the executive winds up leading the board, and it becomes sort of an odd dynamic. Right. Yeah. And I see the best situations are when we sort of flatten the hierarchy and everybody says, okay, we're all people on this team. We all have different functions on the team. How can we best work together? Because in that hierarchy, what I see is, there's a lot of, I want to say fear, because the board, is the boss.
Right.
And then so we're not always honest. I'm not accusing anyone of lying. I'm saying we're not always, just because we're afraid of what they're going to think, what they're going to do, or what they're going to ask us to do. So tell us, how can we create a board that we love, and a board members that love being on a board?
Well, I think one of the first things is, if you have the luxury of building the board, a lot of executives, one of the big problems is you step into the nonprofit and you've got a board already. So it really is important first to build relationships with those board members. You need to get to know every single one of them. Most board members aren't there to be on a power trip, to be in that, taking on that cloak of authority over you as an executive. They're there because they care about the mission. So that is really the most important thing. You bring people onto the board first because they really care about your mission. You can't teach them that. You can teach them their role. You can tap into their expertise in other ways, but you don't just grab someone because of an expertise that they have. You first have to assess how passionate they are about your mission. So that's the common ground. That's what you have in common with your board members, first and foremost. And it's emotional. So they care about it. It's personal. You've got to recognize that. And it's okay to be in relationship with your board members in an appropriate way. But it's a good idea to get a little more personal, get to know them. And then you can help influence, as the executive, you can influence their board experience. And that gives you influence, as you talk about, Marianne, that gives you influence when you need something and want something from the board, because you're all in relationship together. You're all headed in one direction to advance the mission.
Yeah.
That's the common ground. And people don't pay enough attention to that core common ground.
Creating a strong personal connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So I was on the Foster Adoptive Care Coalition board, and it was one of the best, I've been on a lot of boards, that was one of my best experiences. And one of the things that they did was, every summer they would have each one of us come in and have a meeting with the ED and the director of development, sometimes the board president, if he could be there. And they would say, how can we make this the best board experience you've ever had? And I thought I was on a job interview. I was nervous. I'm like, oh my God, what are they going to, I was going to get about you. And they're like, how can we serve you? How can we help? How can we make this a great experience for you? And when I did this several times, but the first time this was a big board, and the guys with ties and, the lawyers and accountants and all the, and all these people that I wasn't. And I said, okay, there's two things. One is that I want to teach y'all how to tell your story better, because I want to teach the board how to tell your story inside their story, right? So people understand why they're connected to your organization.
Right.
And second, now at the time where the offices were, there was like a bar, restaurant down, a little bit divey down at the first floor. I love, I'm the queen of the dive bar. And I'm like, I want to go down to this called Double D's. I want to go down to Double D's and have a drink after the board, because I wanted to know these people.
Good.
Because it's not only the ED and the board, but I don't know these people. I don't know how they make decisions. And what happens is and this is me. All right. I don't get intimidated. There's not a lot of things that can put my tail between my legs, but that room intimidated me. And I went quiet. And I think a lot of people are intimidated. If you see people once a month or 3 or 4 times, this was quarterly meetings, right? I don't know these guys. I don't know how they make decisions. Yeah. And just spending 30 minutes, an hour with them after a board meeting, just having a drink and a snack, it was so fun. And it really helped me break down my biases, right, and my fears. Right. And I think you're right. I think I love what you say about the personal connection between the executive and the board, but also I think among board members.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, because we know that if you're going to be an effective board, you've got to be an effective team. And even though, and this is where that awkward structure comes in that you mentioned earlier, even though technically the board collectively, not individual, no individual on the board has any authority whatsoever. Collectively, the board is the boss of the executive director, can hire and fire. You want to embrace them all as a member of the team. The executive, I'm not saying the executive should be a board member. I don't agree with that. It puts the executive in a conflict of interest right out the gate. But they can act as if, be at the board meetings, be invited to participate, bring things to the board, be a member. I was an executive for a long time. I know how this plays out. To be acknowledged as a member of the team, just like each board member needs to be acknowledged as a member of the team. And the other thing that I think boards don't do is they don't create their own vision for their own work. There's a vision for the organization. There's a vision for where the organization is going, but how is the board coming together as a work group to contribute to that vision within their appropriate scope of roles and responsibilities. Right. And I think that helps solidify the team, because then they have a vision for their job. Partner with the executive. Partner is a word that we have to use sensitively because it implies equal power. We can acknowledge the power dynamics and still embrace people and be inclusive with each other.
Yeah. I mean, I have a couple things just flooding into my brain right now, but the first one I want to say is like, I look at my old company, 501 Creative, my boss, and she doesn't even like me the word boss, Karen Handelman. She was my boss, but she was also my creative partner. And there were times when we would partner, and there are times when she was the authority. And most of us can navigate that, right? Like most adults can navigate. Yes, there's sometimes you're authority, sometimes we're peers, and we know or we can talk about or agree to when those shifts happen, right? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think those are agreements that we can make. And the second thing is, I love that you brought up about the board being a team. So when I facilitate retreats and work with boards, one of the exercises I have them do is develop belief statements. And this is something that's in my book and I've done for years. So and typically I do this for either individuals to sort of solidify their value and what they want to contribute to the world, or organizations. But then I started doing it for boards. It's like, what do we believe as a board? Like, what do we stand for as a team, and how do we want to show up and lead this organization? And it is actually incredibly beautiful to witness them stepping into this power and really understanding who they are, not how they contribute individually, but what do they stand for as a group, right? How do we want to show up as a group?
That's so powerful. And I think that, one of the reasons, one of the big pain points that I know executive have with boards, and I think board members have with each other, is this lack of engagement. They're not doing all that they could be doing. It isn't that you want to work people to death, but they're not engaged enough. And it's because these kinds of connections that you're describing, these more personal things that you work on together, aren't happening in the boardroom. They're coming in, they've got an agenda, and then they leave the meeting. There absolutely needs to be some social time. We've got to bring the board experience more into relationship building dynamics. And you can do that by having people see that they have something in common and they're working on something together. And I think that promotes respect. It promotes a lot of things that are very important for the board to function well. One thing that I mentioned in my book, for executives, we often, I wrote this partly because people would call me and say, would you just come and tell my board what their job is? They don't get it, their role versus my role as the executive. They're getting too involved in the day-to-day. And I started to do some research and other kind of work. And what I realized, number one, training doesn't change behavior. It can it can spark awareness, and awareness can lead to change, but it's not going to change anything for me to come into your boardroom, for the most part, and teach your board something. So what I realized is I made this huge chart of all the problems that I'd ever heard of, over 100 cases, my own experience, colleagues, of something that was wrong with the board. And I discovered that everything that's wrong with your board falls into three areas, three dimensions of your board. Capacity, whether that's you don't have the right people, you don't have enough people, whatever people, and there's a process side, maybe you just don't have the right way of doing things, your agendas are bad, you don't have good policies, whatever. Capacity is a big bucket, and that's where a lot of executives go, and board members too, to solve the problems they see with the board. But the next dimension is a little bit deeper. It's connection. There's 3 C's: capacity, connection. Connection is all about the relationships. And to the point you made, it is about the relationship of the executive with the board executive with the board chair specifically, but also the board members with each other.
Yeah.
All those connections. You may have a problem, and it's not about capacity, it's about something going on in the dynamics of the relationships. And then beyond that, it's even deeper, is culture. And you started to talk about this a minute ago, Marianne, about what are the beliefs? What are the assumptions? People bring different worldviews. I find, just a quick example, that when people go to recruit board members, it's like the first question you want to ask is, what do you believe about recruiting board members? What are your assumptions about it? What comes to mind when you think about recruiting board members? And I hear, well, we don't know anybody. All the good people are taken, or nobody has time anymore. These are all beliefs that hold you back. So the culture, you have to go deeper. You have to discover, what do people believe? And that's a lot different than in capacity, where you're saying, well, they don't quite understand what being a board member is. So I didn't mean to go off on that, but
no, I love it. I love it. So it's capacity, connection, and culture.
And
right?
culture.
Right. And so where do you feel like, the most, like when you did that chart, was there one category that showed up more often than another? Or were they all kind of over the three?
I would say that capacity and connection come up the most, but I don't think it's because that's probably where most of the issues are, because I don't think, as we've just been talking about, boards really work consciously to develop their culture.
Yes.
But culture is very unconscious. So when I was looking at all the problems people were bringing up, they're not necessarily bringing up problems that come from culture, because they don't know it. They don't know that that's what's causing it.
I call that's the problem and admit to, right? So there's the three problems: the problem and admit to, the problem but don't admit to, and the problem you don't know, don't understand, but somebody like you can see. And that would be like culture, right? They don't know they don't know but the problem, I don't feel connected, or I don't, or some of those you can call out those problems. And that's kind of what the beauty of what we do is, what you were doing is, okay, let me tap down a little bit and see, see if I can see this in a deeper way. And I do feel like you're right about culture, that it's not something that you have one, whether it's like a brand, you have one, whether you want it or not,
that's right.
And that to really, how can we create a culture? Because I just was talking with Miriam Dix, and we were talking about organizational change, and she said culture, that's where it starts. And also, and she would agree, and it starts with how we think and feel. And so if you think and feel that it's not fun or of benefit to anybody, personally, professionally, to be on the board, it's going to be hard for you to recruit people.
That's right. Mindset is really where you want to start with a lot of things. And I think, as you were saying at the beginning about your work and how you're starting to go more inside, I think that that's really important, that we have to recognize in our leadership, it's not just about the outside part. It's not just about what we do or, how we talk to people. I mean, communication is critical, but it's also this point of recognize and be aware of, how are you thinking and feeling? How are you talking to yourself?
Yeah.
And when you get that first, then you can open up your perspective to how are other people talking to themselves. It isn't just how are they actually talking, out loud. So
right. And you're absolutely right. And that's why my work became more and more about, personal, professional growth. In a sense that I just call it growth, because those two things are intertwined. But because what was happening before is people said, I'll just give you an example. Can you help us create a plan? Now, that's not really what I do, but I was like, well, tell me what you want this plan, right? That's the problem they knew and admit to. Tell me, well, we don't trust each other. So we thought that if we had a plan, so they wanted the plan to strengthen the trust in the board. That's actually, like I said, here's what we can do. why don't I help you regain your trust, so that from that
Yes.
place of trust, connection, possibility, excitement, now you create a plan.
Create a plan. See, this is an example of someone wants a capacity solution, plan. Let's just create something for a connection problem, which is lack of trust. And that's the kind of thing that we as consultants and coaches out there, we see that dynamic and understanding, and then being able to offer that different perspective, because you were right on with that. I mean,
yeah, I love it, because this is what I love about what just happened is I have this model where I can see things, and then you have a model, and then it's the same thing, but we have like a different way of looking at it, but also kind of gets to the same results, which is what I love about this work. All right, now I want to talk about, because this is the thing that comes up, a chronic issue, the role of fundraising in the board.
Yes. Yes, this is one of the engagement issues where people say, if this matters to you, my board is not engaged, and they dig a little deeper and they say, well, they're not engaged in fundraising. That's really the engagement piece I want. And there's so many things in this, but let me just hit a couple of key things I see. One is, you've got to manage expectations from the beginning. I'm working with a board and executive right now, not on this issue specifically, but a board assessment. And this is one of the problems. The board says, well, we don't want to talk about fundraising when we recruit new board members because we don't want to scare them away. Give me a break. You want to put fundraising front and center in your recruitment. And the first thing you need to do is recruit for leadership. People keep thinking, oh, we got to have people with money. Forget that. You want people who understand how to engage and motivate others to get involved in something. And that something is building relationships to get the word out about your nonprofit. 90% of what board members can do to contribute to fundraising is about building relationship and being ambassadors, not about asking for money. That will flow, or maybe there's some staff that can do that. But board members have this fear, as you were talking about the fear earlier, well, I got to go out and ask my friends. No, you've got to shift your mindset about fundraising. If you're passionate about the mission, and you shouldn't have people on your board who aren't, go talk to people about it. Don't twist their arms to be interested in it. If they're not, move on to somebody else. But doing that, thanking, being a good steward, you're helping with all of the tasks that are needed to cultivate interest and involvement in your organization. And from interest and involvement will flow investment. And I think that that's a way to think about engaging your board in fundraising. But first, manage the expectations. Everybody on the board needs to give a cash gift that they're able. Doesn't have to be a lot of money. And then you need to talk about it and transition. If you aren't a fundraising board, you have to be a governing board regardless, but you can transition into a board that partners with staff to raise money. But you have to recognize where you are, start where you are, and move toward the leadership and the engagement of people who love to go out and do it. There are people who like it.
Yeah. Right. So interest, involvement, investment, right? That's the flow. And I love what you said, why people we just want people with a lot of money because they think they won't have to. Sometimes, we want to have, the people with money because then we think it's going to be easier to raise money, right? We're sort of, and so I love what you said about just getting really good leaders and connectors. I also believe that it is not the role of the board to ask for money. I think that's a higher level skill. There's a lot of, managing, your own thoughts and feelings around money, asking, for something and, managing the rejection and objections. That takes a little bit of work. And so that I love what you're saying about board. And in fact, I have a program all about this that just teaches boards how to have these conversations out in the community so that you're basically just driving interested leads. And the thing about it is what you said, you don't have to strong arm. If there's a connection, great. If not, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Right. You
just
know,
move
it's
on.
you don't have to, like, first of all, you can't make people care. That's my whole thing. You can't make people care. That's not your
Absolutely.
job. Your job is to see, hey, does this resonate with you? Does this interest you? Would you like to learn more? And whatever you decide is totally okay. And then you're going to tell the ED or the development, hey, this person's interested, you know, follow up. And then they follow. So you're just driving leads instead of saying, like, can you go out and ask? No one wants to ask their friends for money.
No.
Like, because that's even harder than asking. I think it's even harder than asking a stranger, because if they say no,
Right.
then you got a relationship, you know,
Right.
baggage to
Yeah. And
clean
you
up.
feel you're imposing on them, or then you feel like, well, if I ask them, I know they're going to come back and ask me.
Yes.
And, you know, I don't feel comfortable doing that. You know, with all my years of
Right.
experience, I do feel comfortable going out and talking about the mission of, you know, I was on several boards in my career. I still am. And I'm, you know, I'm okay about talking about the mission of the organizations I serve and why they're where they are, and want to help in that. So my housekeeper is here. This is edited, right?
Well, it will be now.
Okay, let me just tell her quickly not to
I'll pause.
Just 1 second.
All right. So what are you focused on now? What do you think is the new thing that you're working on or you're helping organizations? Because the thing about you is I can already tell how many degrees you are a consummate learner. So I know there's always something new that you're learning or discovering.
Thank you. Well, actually there is. I'm focusing now on board member engagement. I always like to ask people, what's your top of mind challenge? And I did that almost a year ago now. I put out a survey for executive directors, and it wasn't the only one, but the top of mind challenge with their board was board member engagement. And it was even more if you fold in lack of engagement with fundraising. So I am working on identifying how can I support executives, not by bringing me into the room or having me intervene with the board, which in the past has been kind of the way I've done some work. I've done board retreats, I've done board training, I've done board coaching. But for me to empower the executive to get their board more engaged. So I'm studying about that. I'm learning about that. And I'm going, again, my goal is to create a program for that, and then a mastermind following up where we can really dig deep and work together on each individual, a small group of each individual executive situations. But one of the things that I am learning that I will share, it's what I brought up earlier, is this personalization and experiences are two strategies that the research shows for all kinds of organizations, associations with members, for example, have a lot to do with how people get engaged. And we're not using those strategies very much in the boardroom.
What's an example?
Well, the personalization, we talked about that. You gave a great example. Meet with people one-on-one, ask what they're interested in, what do they want to learn on the board in the coming year? Why are they there? What do they care about? What skills do they have to bring? You really get to know people, and the personal side too. On the experiences, you know, I can't believe how many people. I have a board orientation success program, an online program. And when I created that, I did some research, and I found out 75% of the board members that I interviewed or surveyed said they never had a formal orientation to what it means to be a board member.
Wow.
They get handed a job description or a board manual. And that is, in terms of experiences, you're brand new at something, you're brand new walking in the door to your first board meeting. What is that experience going to be for that person? Pay attention to that. craft that experience, that is your best opportunity to make sure that person, sticks to you like glue, is engaged, is excited, isn't sitting back, as so many board members have said, well, I just was quiet for the first 6 months. What a waste.
Yeah, that was right. What a waste. And also, like, you're taking something that is personal and making it transactional. Oh, here's our manual. And it feels really impersonal. Like, so talking about personal, that feels impersonal. And also, I hear people say, well, I don't want to overload them. Like, I'm going to let them get going, and then 2 or 3 or 4 months. And I was like, well, no, like, no one is more excited as when they start.
That's right.
So now you're going to let them like lean back for 3 or 4 months to, to figure it out with their, but no, they're not figuring anything out. They're just learning. They're learning to not be engaged.
Yeah. And
right?
I mean,
they're already learning, like, oh, this is what this is about, because I think people want to be respectful. And then they're like, I'm just going to let them ease in. No, easing into them is neglect. That's not being relational. That's being neglectful,
Good point. Well, and I also want executives to know you have a role here. Don't feel that you can't have a role in engaging board members, because it can be you. It doesn't have to be the board chair. I mean, ideally, if you're tag teaming with your board chair and other board members to really bring people into the fold, that's great. But if it's not happening, it can be you, and you need to make time for it. You need to make time for working with the board, and you need to let the board know that this takes time, so you're not overwhelmed, that you need to acknowledge a chunk of your time, a big chunk of your job is board development. And so, I'm curious, of those of you out there that are executive directors, after your new board members' first board meeting, how many of you have called them up the following week and asked them if they had any questions, or how was that experience, or what do they need from you, or even from other board members, going forward?
Right.
I bet that doesn't happen.
And probably not. And I, like, a lot of times when I would tell people, oh, we did these things, like we did these one-on-ones, and it's time for our one-on-ones. Summer, they would always do them like in July or something. And I'd be like, oh, that feels like it would take up so much time. Like, yeah. And what an investment, right? I don't need to do it. Like I would, because I'm a student of language, right? So I don't need to, I don't want to, I choose to.
Yes.
I choose to invest my time in building a strong relationship, because I know it's going to make everything easier on the other side.
Right.
And I think any time you spend building that relationship is time well spent. It just is.
We know from research, I'm evidence-based, bias, and not everything can we have that information, but when we have it, and we do have it about board performance, when you have an effective board of directors in a nonprofit, we know the nonprofit performs better. And that means the mission is advancing, and you're doing better, and you're having more impact. And isn't that what you're spending your time and energy and blood, sweat, and tears and everything on? So don't dismiss the board's role in that, and the board's potential for really making a difference. It does.
And I love it. I love it. All right. So this is such an amazing conversation, Mary. Is there anything else you want to share with the listeners?
Well, we talked about earlier, and you are participating in this.
Okay.
Yeah, we're doing a giveaway. It's called the Effective Nonprofit Success Toolkit. And what that is, I don't need a long explanation. It's just an opportunity to go online and download a bunch of gifts from coaches and consultants to nonprofits. These are the experts in the field. Marianne, myself, a whole bunch of others like us are going to put up some good stuff for you, and it's all free, whether it's a mini course, whether it's a PDF, an ebook, a checklist, whatever it is. There's going to be several things up there for you to grab free. And this is going to run from November 6th to November 26th. It's like an early holiday present for you.
And I love it.
So the way to learn about it, you can't kind of go find it now because it's going to be online and there'll be a link, but watch social media on November 6th. Watch social media because all of us coaches and consultants are going to be spreading the word, sending out the links to our people and posting on social media so that you can learn about it, and just watch for Effective Nonprofit Leadership Success Toolkit.
And I'm on it. So if you're on my email list, Mary is at hilandconsulting.org. And also you said you have 6 steps. You got a little freebie right now.
I do. I have a freebie. If you go to my website, it's 6 steps you must know to unleash the potential of your board. And that's free. Also, I'll just mention, I have a podcast too, and Marianne has been a guest on it, Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. And I have some other freebies I mentioned from time to time on that.
So if you're connected, if you get connected to Mary or connected to me, we will make sure that you know about the giveaway, because it's going to be super cool. In November, I'll be here in a heartbeat.
Before you know it. Before you know it.
All right.
Yeah, and I don't think there's ever been a nonprofit giveaway like this. So it's a great opportunity to get some tools and things that you might not be able to get otherwise.
Yeah, and it's a great opportunity for somebody like me, and I met you through this, right?
Yes.
And I get connected with other people and see what everyone else is out doing in the world. And so I love, because when I do this 3-day or 2-day summit in January, and it's the same thing, it's nice to be connected, and we're just all, a rising tide raises all boats. Like, we're all just here to help people do better, right? And put more good in the world.
We are.
All right, Mary, last question. This is always my wrap-up question. It is actually, tonight is karaoke night. So I'm a karaoke fanatic. If we ever were in a bar together, what's your go-to song, Mary? What are you going to sing for me?
Oh my gosh. Well, the song that comes to mind is what's that one from Man of La Mancha? To Dream the Impossible Dream.
I don't know if I can sing that one, but I know the song.
Yeah, to dream the impossible dream. Right, to fight the unbeatable foe. This is what it feels like to be in nonprofits.
Yeah, we'll all be like, yes. Well, Mary, thank you so much for being here with me today. I just so much wisdom, and really build those relationships with your board, right?
Yes. Thank you so much, Marianne. This was so much fun. And I love hearing your insights and inspiration and wisdom. It's been great.
Thank you. All right, that is it for this awesome episode of the Influential Nonprofit. If you haven't yet, you can go to theinfluentialnonprofit.com. I have my goodies, which is your Up-Level Your Influence Starter Kit, which is some really cool stuff that got a lot of the principles and the things that I talk about. There's some guides and some cool stuff you can download there. And that's it for me and this episode. I'll see you next time.